But let's get it started on the biggest game of the weekend. Arsenal versus Man United. I'll let you kick that one off since you didn't join us on the last pod.
Oh, let me kick it off. All right. Well, firstly, I thought you guys previewed it really well, and I think the thing I'd say is it got me really excited to watch the game. So I did watch the game. No headphones on or anything. I'll actually listen to the commentary. Kind of wish I hadn't because I think it's Conor McNamara, the Irishman. I don't like his commentary very much. I wish we had some Drury or someone like that at that moment. But anyway, did have Andy Townsend in the passenger seat. He's always all right. And I thought it was. I thought your preview was probably better than the match in terms of building up the excitement because the match itself, I wouldn't say it was terrible. It definitely wasn't that, but it wasn't great. And I think that's partly credit to United, and it's partly Arsenal not playing the same style of football because I know you guys had the discussion about how they're playing this season. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter when you can take 10 points from a possible 12 to start the season. And I wouldn't agree with Arteta saying it was domination in this game. I get how he comes to that conclusion, but I think the way United set up, like it wasn't Arsenal domination. It wasn't incision. It wasn't putting them under real pressure all the time. It was just sort of having territory, keeping possession. But I think maybe they're more swashbuckling last season, but maybe they get hit on the counter more last season. So again, when I grade Arsenal after this game, I think I still sit in the same place because it wasn't a convincing win, while it was a good win, and it's good for momentum, and it's good for the narrative that now we can go forward and say, well, look at what they're doing when they're not playing particularly well. I think Gary Neville brought that up in the post match on Sky Sports. So I'm still not unsure on Arsenal. I'm sure they're a good team. I'm sure they have really good players pretty much in every position. I am quite sure of that. But am I sure that they're better than last season? That I'm still unsure of. But I don't think it matters when you can win this game because this is a big game. United are defensively good enough to go away to grounds and make it tough, although their away record is terrible. And to the point, I think if this game was played at Old Trafford, we might have seen something a little bit different because United are so poor on the road. But I agree with Ten Hag that they looked more compact. But I guess we'll dissect United. But all in all, I think both teams can be reasonably happy with what happened out on the pitch. The game could have been a bit of better spectacle, but yeah, I'm more interested in your feeling as an Arsenal fan, just post match, what happened in the match.
Well, it's it's interesting, like the approaches of the both teams, because I watched AFTV's tactical breakdown of the game, and they mentioned something that I mentioned in the 3-2 win from January at the Emirates, where and I noticed in this game as well where Arsenal were more than happy for like Onana, Lindelof, Martinez to like play those triangles amongst themselves, and it was what I mentioned back then where here United have the ball, have it in your defensive half. We don't care. We'll sit back, try to break us down because you haven't developed those patterns of play yet. And in the tactical breakdown video that I watched, they showed, I think like United had like 280 passes, something like that. I think like 90% of those passes were in their own half. There was like
It looked that way.
20 or 30 passes that actually made it into their attacking half, and I think it was only like 4 passes inside the box. So there was like that many entries into the box. So like
Did all right with one of them, pretty much the first one.
yeah, which was cancelled out like a minute later. But this might be Arteta's tactic against United, where it's like have the ball, because like I think like the first half possession, I think United had like almost 55% if I'm not mistaken, and then and then like overall in the game it was Arsenal 51% or 52%. So Whereas you don't really, like, going off of last year to this year, you don't really think that Arsenal would be happy to have that kind of possession. You think that they're going more down the City path where it's like 60%, 65%. And as I was watching the game as well, I was frustrated a little bit because, see, I'm more frustrated, I guess, with not necessarily with Arsenal because I can see that this is like their approach to the game, but it's more with United. It's like they're a frustrating team to watch because they've not just because they've spent so much on the team, but like they have some really good players in that team, but they still play really bad football to watch, and they can still manage to stay in games. So it's frustrating because like it just pisses you off that with that amount of good players that they're playing such negative football, and but they're still getting results. Whereas like for instance with Tottenham last year, it was like that at the start, but then as the season went on, they still continued playing terrible football, but the results stopped coming. So yeah, like they're a really weird team to that they're not a team that you can get behind, that you can watch as, for instance, a neutral. Whereas like for instance, I mentioned in the last two pods, I'm actually enjoying the way Tottenham play, and like and that's coming from an Arsenal fan. Like Tottenham, especially compared to last year, like I don't mind watching a Tottenham game. Whereas like I would not waste 90 minutes of my life watching a Tottenham game last year because one, it's Tottenham, and two, like it's absolutely horrible to watch. And now like I'm getting the same feeling with United.
Yeah, yeah, I can somewhat see that. I mean, this isn't the game to judge United in terms of that. I think going away to Arsenal
Yeah,
and
but come on,
having to go with
these first four games, they've pretty much been. This has probably been their best game, and I'd say that it wasn't necessarily because
it was definitely
of
their
them.
best game.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say it was because of their choices. I'd say it's more because of Arsenal's choices, the way they decided to play.
Yeah. So when you're talking about your frustration with United, I get that. I'm more frustrated that they play that way, and they should play that way because I think defensively that is their strength. And counter-attacking, look, I want to dispel this notion that Manchester United shouldn't be a counter-attacking team. They should be a counter-attacking team. Manchester United were at their best under Ferguson when they won those 3 titles in a row as a counter-attacking team. It's not bad football to play counter-attacking football. So where my frustration comes in with Manchester United is that they're a team who play like that, or whose strengths are that, but they're trying to masquerade as something different, something that plays out from the back, something that plays all these passes. And to your point, the passes were all between the defenders in those first however long it was. It was just, and I can understand some benefits of ball retention in terms of makes the players feel like they're trying to play football. Although whenever it came time to deliver a ball into the next line, it was just horrendous. But it gives you a bit of a rest. You can't play the whole game without the ball. But why, for me, when I look at tactics, particularly under Mourinho, and this is like vintage Mourinho. This is Mourinho at his best when he had his Chelsea, his Inter, and even that United team he did kind of well with. Why, maybe not every time, but why sometimes, why can't they just say to Wan-Bissaka, you go all the way forward, we'll adjust our shape around that, we'll compact around you, we'll pin you up on Zinchenko, and then we'll just play a long goal kick or a long offside, and we'll just play around that, and we'll compact the whole pitch there, and we'll just play to there. I don't think that's bad to watch. In fact, I remember Real Madrid in that 13-14 season where they won the Champions League. They were some of the best exponents of doing that, of going long and setting up their shape around a long ball. And honestly, like, it gives you a chance for that 50-50 ball if you're quicker in the transition. And because Man United are a counter-attacking team, they are quick in the transition. If you can win that second ball and you can play off that, you can find openings, and you can play far more exciting football than what we're watching with this playing out from the back. It's bullshit, really. It is. If you don't know how to do it, Why the fuck are you doing it? So I'm not saying maybe every time, maybe they want the ball sometimes, but especially with a target like Zinchenko there, why can't we just pin someone more physical against him, play it long to him, and then we'll try and feed off second balls? I don't like the masquerading. So that's where my frustration comes in with United. But to Ten Hag's point, they were solid. And another but, why are we here again? Why are we having to talk about them as if they have to build from the very start again? Why are they starting all over again after a whole season's of work last season under him? Uh, and, well, comically, going forward to your point about them maybe regressing like Tottenham did, if it's Harry Maguire and Johnny Evans playing, if Lissandro Martinez and Varane are a bit injury prone this season, yeah, they are going to regress pretty quickly. It can't be those. It was bad enough that Dallow's already at left back. So, man. But on the bright side, I think Højlund looked pretty good when he came on.
Yeah, I was actually a little bit scared. Like once I saw him like pretty much muscling off Gabriel like 2 or 3 times.
Budget
Like,
Haaland.
yeah, well, I was like, this is. I'm like, okay, he can. It looks like he can play in the Premier League against like bigger defenders, and if they can start utilizing his strength like that as like a hold up striker, to bring in the players around him, then this could be something. And like in and
Do you reckon he looks good as a counter attacking forward as well? They're almost doubling down.
not in the sense that if he's the first pass that you find, and then he's the interconnecting pass to like a Rashford or a Martial or an Anthony, then yeah, he can definitely be like if he's the outball, because you're like, okay, he's definitely going to be able to hold it up.
But Bruno could also be the outball and he could be making the runs. So it just plays into that strength a little bit more. It's like
Yeah.
they've added to the strength that they have, but it's like Ten Hag's so reluctant to use the strength.
See
Just use the strength.
see the thing is you mentioned
Well, he wasn't in this game. It was his
Yeah.
plan. I'm sorry. I just
Well,
needed to say. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Fergie, and like we've now that like a lot of his team has retired. Like I've heard like Scholes, Neville, Giggs, like all those players say like Fergie always used to say, when you receive the ball, the first pass you should be looking for is forward. So it wasn't necessarily like a counter-attacking team where it's like put 10 men behind the ball, pump it long, and you know, it's just like, okay, wherever we receive the ball, try to look for the first pass to be forward. It's similar to, I guess, the way Liverpool play under Klopp, where it's like but obviously there's adjustments in like the press and all that stuff, but it's like when we receive the ball, let's play forward. Whereas now, like with Ten Hag, it's like, yeah, like when we receive the ball, let's try and keep possession, build it up, get like 10 passes, and then go forward. So you guys aren't accustomed to that. You guys don't have that in you. Like, in a way, maybe he's trying to build towards that, but the personnel that he has is just, it doesn't seem right for that.
Yeah, I agree. It could be a little bit of Arsenal's tactics, like you say, with Arteta choosing to play maybe a little bit more withdrawn to ask those questions of United, and then obviously then that's the trap, and that's what they've been forced into, and then we see the results of it. Like you say, like we say, they're not very good at it. Yeah, man. What I do know about United after this game is I think Eriksen is a lot better than Mason Mount in that role. That was clear. I think Eriksen's almost a serviceable number 8 now. I thought last season it was a bit iffy because I don't like his work off the ball as much, but he looks like enough of a presence in there. I think he's in good positions. His experience of playing it for a year now, I think it's starting to tell. So they looked more solid. Casemiro was playing more withdrawn in between the centre backs, particularly early. So it was definitely the tactic to not get exposed. So again, that's why I say this wasn't the game to judge them, because they did come in more negative. But yeah, like we just keep saying, maybe Højlund makes a little bit of a difference. I'm not going to pin that on a 19, 20-year-old. So I'm not expecting him to be the difference. He can make a difference because he looks a good player. But yeah, this United team just don't look any better than last season, and that's the main point. And I think, with that being said, I think it transitions into the perfect question of it's the same question, but it's the Arsenal perspective. Do you feel better about Arsenal after? I guess this is the official start to the season because we're at an international break now, so we can take a little bit of stock of what we've seen. And yeah, do they look a better team for you going forward this season?
They probably look a little bit more solid defensively with Rice in there, I'd say.
Yeah, he was good, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Declan Rice was good.
And I do prefer we've talked about this. I do prefer White as a right back because you saw those triangles then between Erdegaard, Saka, and White that did cause problems. And it just like because it just seemed like Saka seemed so isolated when Partey was playing at right back, whereas now he always, if he couldn't beat his man 1-on-1, he'd then pass it back to White. White would play a triangle with Erdegaard, or he'd play it back to Saliba. Like he'd have a ball to play back to keep possession and then switch sides rather than try to take on 1-on-1 and then lose the ball. So I do prefer that. And then, but that's obviously because that it allows you to play that way because Zinchenko was playing left back.
He's
As well.
so like you can see he's so much better at that inverted role than Thomas Partey. He's just so much better. He finds these creative balls that just change the whole angle of the attack, and then Arsenal, especially with Arsenal's threat on either wing, if he could do that and change the angle of attack so that United are a little bit off guard, and like Thomas Partey doesn't have that in his locker.
But it's not just
That's
that.
the
Like,
difference for me.
but like the thing is, Zinchenko also overlaps at times as well with Martinelli, and he creates those triangles. And I just think that when you're introducing Rice as a number 6 and Havertz as a number 8, and I think we'll have like a little section on Havertz because a lot of people have been getting on his back. So I'm going to come to his defense. So we'll do that. We'll do that a little bit later.
Another Kai Havertz defense.
Once we've wrapped up the game. But like I think with the introduction of those two and how important Xhaka was in that number 8 role last year, you're almost starting. You've at least taken one step back in terms of team chemistry. I know the core. I know like 8 players out of the 11 are all the same, but you're still starting with 2 players and 2 players in midfield as well. So they still need to build up those that chemistry. You still need to build up those triangles, those patterns of play. So they do need to be taught all that stuff. It's probably easier for Rice because he's sitting and holding. So it's just okay. Break up the play, find the pass to Erdegaard, find the pass to Saka. Find those forward passes pretty much. So it's easier for him than someone like Havertz who has to make forward runs, has to make triangles. He probably has a lot more instructions than what Rice does because he's playing a position that's a little bit more further forward.
Yeah, and I think the main because it sounds like when you've gone through everything that you said you liked, sounds like this game, the approach was more, let's go back to at least the same shape that we played last season. Because you say it was a bit of a recycling of a tactic that he might have used last season, Arteta, in terms of sitting off United. So it was a bit more like last season, and obviously Gabriel comes in to the team. And yeah, I think they weren't a swashbuckling. That might have something to do with Bukayo Saka not really having a very good game.
I thought he had an okay game. It was better than against Fulham and those 3 early games.
He's Bukayo Saka, so he's always okay, I'd say. But and he'll always draw gravity. But yeah, and I don't know that. What kills me about Arsenal, because I was asking the question from the start of the game because I was so kind of shocked by myself in terms of asking why Gabriel wasn't starting when I've said from the start I don't think he's he's the answer to Arsenal, or he's got to be the guy who will be in the team if Arsenal are able to beat Man City and
Hang
get
on,
to where they want to
which
go.
Gabriel?
Gabriel, I don't know how to say his last name. Centre back Gabriel, of
Magalhaes, I
course.
think.
We'll talk about the Ford
Yeah.
Gabriel Jesus in a minute as well. But I found myself asking the question, like, why? Firstly, why did I come to his defense? Because I think he had a pretty good season last season, and that's got to count for something. I mean, what's the point of having a good season if I'm not going to change my opinion of you? So I thought he had a good season last season. He was a little iffy down the stretch, but Arsenal were a little iffy down the stretch, so I can't pin that on him. And then the second question, and I think the more important question is he actually the guy who should be in this Arsenal team going forward, or is there someone that I think that Arsenal could upgrade with him? And I think there is, but I only found one guy who Arsenal could upgrade there. And I think if they were, and this is what annoys me, and this will bring us to the Kai Havertz point, but if they could go out and get an Alessandro Bastoni from Inter, I think he is the ideal left-sided centre back for that Arsenal to take them to the next level, because he's better on the ball. If you don't want Zinchenko overlapping, underlapping, he can actually overlap and underlap at the appropriate times. So you'll get an extra weapon there. He's imperious. He's a physical specimen. He's young. And I don't know how much it would have cost. Inter would have been fighting hard to keep it, but also Inter in financial trouble. And we saw across town as well at AC what happens if you come in with the right bid for Sandro Tonali. They had to let him go, and he didn't even want to go. So he's one who I thought, if you could just redirect the Kai Havertz funds, maybe keep Xhaka, maybe you needed someone in that midfield. I don't know if it's the answer, but he's the one who could have upgraded. Maybe I think they had the right tactic in going for a midfielder, because I think Xhaka was more important to replace with either someone younger or someone better than Gabriel was to replace him at the back, because he had a good season, like I say. So they got the right tactic, but I just think they got it wrong with this Havertz one. And yeah, I wish that money was spent somewhere else, but this gives you a perfect chance to offer your Kai Havertz defense, because I think we can all agree he looked like a man absolutely bereft of confidence out there. Maybe not even a man, maybe more of a boy, but he's just, yeah, not great.
Look, I don't want the way that I'm going to start it is I don't want I'm going to compare it to similarly to Bergkamp, and I'm not saying Kai Havertz is the next coming of Bergkamp, but you can also draw comparisons to managers. For instance, Sir Alex didn't win anything his first 3 seasons, and then I think in his 4th season did he win the FA Cup or something? And then
Yeah,
and then he went on and but he finished I think like 2nd and like 11th, 8th, and then I think he finished like 2nd again or 3rd. So with managers, he needed time to settle into his and get his team all ready and build everything the way he wanted to have things built. Obviously, managers should be compared with managers. So comparing with, for instance, with Arteta, where Arteta wins the FA Cup, finishes 8th, finishes 5th, finishes 2nd. But players, for instance, I think Bergkamp, I think a lot of Arsenal fans are actually getting on his back, because I think his first, I think it was either 8 games or 11 games. It took him a while to actually bed in, and I think he got his first goal after 8 or 11 games. For some reason, those two numbers are in my head, but people were calling him a flop and whatnot. If I remember seeing some of the newspaper clippings when you go back and whatnot. So a lot of people were getting on his back, and then he turned himself into an Arsenal legend. Yes, and like Kai Havertz, I think he won the Champions League with Ajax, if I'm not mistaken. I think in was it 94?
90,
or 96?
95 or 6,
I think yeah. So he's a Champions League winner. He came to Arsenal as a Champions League winner, if I'm not mistaken. Kai Havertz, Champions League winner as well. But my point is, give this guy time to settle in. He's only 22 years old. He's just come to the club. No one can seem to find a position for him because he played under Tuchel, played under played under Lampard. Was there another coach at Chelsea that he played under?
He's 24, by the way.
24.
22 just didn't sound right to me.
Okay.
I'm like, he's not 20.
Okay, he's 24. Whatever.
Anyway.
But he's still in that age. He's not even 25. Pretty much. So he played under, I think, 2 or 3 different coaches at Chelsea, and this is a Chelsea that the whole team has been horrible, and they're still continuing to be horrible.
And as Mutty said, he was out of position as well. I know. There's defenses.
Like, and that's the thing. Like right now, Arteta is trying to. A lot of people might say, "Oh, he's trying to shoehorn him into a position," but it's like, well, he's trying to redevelop him and trying to teach him a new position. We've seen players change positions even in like their 20s and whatnot. Even for instance, myself, like I first started playing as a centre back just because I was tall and strong when I first started playing football as an under 11, and then I transitioned into a forward. And then I transitioned into a midfielder.
Kai Havertz defense, or is this you?
But I'm just saying.
Stats? Give us some stats now. Goals, appearances.
but my point is, there is development and there is learning new positions as well. So you can't expect him to just, like, yes, some players just come in straight away. They score a goal in their debut. They set the world alight. That happens. But for a lot of players, they need to be given time, and I'm more than willing to give him even this whole season to be. I'm more than willing to give him this whole season before I start making any judgments.
Okay, all right. But firstly, on the Bergkamp point, number one, I think with Bergkamp, he was cheeky physical. He was a big guy, Dennis Bergkamp, and the second thing is he came from a different league. He'd never played in the Premier League before. So I think it's right to give him at least 11 games to start to bed in to a new league, to a new country, everything like that. Kai Havertz didn't even leave the city. He'd been in the city for, 4 years now? 3-4 years at least at Chelsea. So I doubt he would have had to move houses. So there's no excuse there. And furthermore, he knew the league. He knows what he's playing in now. There's no acclimatizing to the Premier League. He's been playing in it for years. So I don't think I get your point on letting him bed in and letting him. That's the change in the new team. For me, it's a little bit of a look at how clever I am sort of signing from Arsenal. It's like, let's reinvigorate this guy. There's a player there, and that's the premise I will always disagree with on Kai Havertz. I don't think there's a particularly great player there. I got to be honest. I just don't think. To Mutty's point that he made on the last pit, the mental fortitude, I'm not sure is there. I haven't seen it. He is 24. He is a young player. He will improve because he is 24 and he's a young player, and now he's playing under a good manager. So I'll give you that. I'll concede that point. But I'm not judging Kai Havertz off the 4 Arsenal games I've seen. I'm judging him off the 4 Premier League years that I've seen. And that's why. And honestly, even when they got him from Leverkusen, I thought 70 mil, that's a little bit rich for a. And I keep saying this, that those players in that mold, the João Felixes, the Charles de Ketelaeres, these number 10s who are languid, who I think they hypnotize scouts. They're just like, oh, look at this graceful guy who's got a bit of height, who plays as the number 10 and who has this great technique. It's just like, dude, like, what are we watching? I don't think there's much more than that. I'd rather a Christopher Nkunku in there who can do something dynamic and who can break lines like that. So I get all your points, but you're never going to convince me that Kai Havertz is a good player. He's the only one who can convince me that he's a good player, and so far I haven't seen it. But to your point, he does need more time. I'm not ready to call him a flop yet. I'm just saying 60-odd million, 70-odd million could have been redirected somewhere better for me.
Possibly, yeah. Like, I'll admit that I personally would not have paid 65 mil for him. But that's down to the two clubs that negotiated the sale price. So I think all credit to Chelsea on that point for
They did
for
well.
they did well on their end. Time will tell whether Arsenal did well on their end, but I
That's
do
fair.
I do stand by my point at the start of the season. I think if he can get 10 goals, 10 assists as a midfielder, if he can bring in those numbers in all competitions. So and if he's playing week in week out, that's going to be some 40, 50 games. If he can get those numbers as a number 8, I think that's an excellent season. And I think that people will say that is a successful signing. If it's 15 goal contributions, so a mixture of 10 to 15 goal contributions, I think that will be a very good season. But yeah, it just depends what his role is in the team because yeah, he started the Community Shield as a number 9. The last 4 games he started as a number 8. So depends where he's playing. If Nketiah and Jesus get injured and he starts playing as a number 9, I would expect 15 goals, 10 to 15
Yeah.
goals. Um,
Yeah, all competitions.
yeah,
So I think
exactly.
that's a good point what you bring up in terms of what success is for, and maybe it's an insight into why Arsenal did direct those funds that way. Because if we saw them last season, they had 3 players who I think in the league alone got 10 of each goals and assists in Martinelli, Erdegaard, and Saka. So I
I
guess the thinking might be there. Can we add another guy to have maybe 4 players who can do that? So and that's why they directed the funds there rather than looking at a striker. And I guess that leads us, unless you have anything else, to the last point. Um, I don't know. Was this the game
well,
that said?
well,
Was
hang
this
on.
the game that said it?
Just for
Okay,
the
yeah,
record, just for
yeah,
you,
go.
you mentioned that like he most likely didn't have to move houses. He's already played 3 to 4 years in the Premier League. I never mentioned any of that stuff, but I mentioned betting into this team
Yeah.
because he's going to be playing. He's never played as a number 8, so if he's playing as an 8, he's learning that position. Give the lad time.
It doesn't explain why he forgot how to strike a ball when he's 6 yards out from goals.
You know what?
Anyway,
You know what that is. Though I reckon everyone has gotten onto his back so early,
yeah, no confidence.
including the Arsenal fans. Yeah, like there's very little confidence there,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
very
for sure.
unfortunate. Like, whereas if they showed him like love, just and like try to show him like support rather than immediately dismissing him,
I
then
think they've been that bad. Given what I've seen from Arsenal fans over the years, they haven't been that harsh on him. I think some of them are
I've
trying. I think a few, but I think that performance that he turns in is like, what the hell am I getting behind? What the
But
hell
you
is
know
this
what?
guy doing?
I did not mind. I did not mind his performance against United that too much. Like I thought that this was actually probably one of his better performances, like
Well,
all
that says
round.
it all for me.
I
Unfortunately,
know that we'll obviously get to the first goal. I know that he played a square pass, like a
we'll
first time
get to
square
it. Is there
pass.
more to talk
No,
about
no, no, like
this guy?
this is the
Oh yeah, it
transition.
was his pass.
This is the
Yeah, go on.
transition. Like he obviously played a first time square pass in the middle of the field, trying to find I think Erdegaard if I'm not mistaken, and then that leads to the first goal. And yeah, like I think something like that. It's like he's trying to possibly do things that maybe a little bit more riskier to try and look. Oh yeah, like I can play a really good first time pass instead of just okay, let's bring it all back to something really simple. Bring down the ball, control it, play it to Zinchenko, play it to Martinelli, play it to Nketiah, not a square pass to try and switch the play to Erdegaard. And yeah, that obviously leads to the first goal. And you know what? Like, was it Ericsson or Bruno that played? I think it was Ericsson that played that pass.
Ericsson played the ball,
No,
and
it was a really nice ball.
yeah, no, it was a really nice ball. Saliba's defending isn't great there. I
No,
think Ben White
Ben
does.
White's
I think
defending was
Ben White
horrible.
does. Who's?
Ben White's as well.
No, I thought Ben White did the right thing. I think he was ready to show Rashford down the line. That's where Saliba needs to step in and block the avenue inside. I think between the two of them, they could have done better. I think
It seemed like they
that's
both.
for me. It's not for Ben White to block the avenue inside because he's the one playing right back. He's the one who has to be wary of Rashford going on the outside of him. For me, it's Saliba who has to block the avenue in. And Saliba just sort of stands right behind Ben White. There's one camera angle where you can see it perfectly. His angle is just right behind Ben White, so he's not affecting the game in any way, shape, or form there. And maybe he expects Rashford. I don't know why you'd expect Rashford to go on the outside because he's right-footed and he wants to, from that range, he wants to cut in and shoot. So I thought it was bad defending by Saliba. I'll give him a pass because he's a great defender, but in that moment he did cover himself in glory. I've had enough of talk about Kai Havertz, but one thing that Kai Havertz has done is he's taken a little bit of heat off another guy who normally gets heat in that Arsenal team. And I wasn't annoyed about the groundswell that built up for Eddie Nketiah to start this game, but I was surprised by it. I'm like, I think we're overrating what he's been doing. I think he has improved on last season. I'll give him that. I even gave him that on the first pod. I could see a more visible, sort of closer to Gabriel Jesus kind of press from the front. And I was like, yeah, that's all right. But come on, like, I think if Gabriel Jesus is fit, and maybe his fitness isn't 100%, so maybe that's why. But if they're both fit, it's got to be Gabriel Jesus over Nketiah. I'm sorry, Nketiah in this game, and like, I don't want to take too much from one game. Maybe he still surprises me. He has surprised me to this point. Maybe he goes beyond the level I think he can reach. But his level for me is a top quality backup striker for a team challenging for the title. When the other striker's fit, he shouldn't play ahead of him. So maybe it was a fitness thing, but for me, if they're both fully fit, it's got to be Gabriel Jesus.
I'd say it's fitness because Jesus didn't even come on against Fulham.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
He was on the bench. So
yeah. And I think that's my last point on this game. So anything you've got left to go through?
Just quickly regarding the refereeing decisions, because Ten Hag definitely made some comments.
He was so salty.
Yeah.
He was so salty after trying to complain about the offsides.
Oh, how do you complain about that? Like, there's dozens of cameras and they're all calibrated. And
but honestly, I think in my ideal world that goal actually stands. To be quite like, you should just get one view at it, no lines, and then if you can't see that's a clear and obvious, go with on-field decision.
No, see, that's
but
the
once
thing,
you get the lines out, you can't complain once they get the lines out. But what I will say is even Serie A uses semi-automated technology, the kind we saw at the World Cup. How the Premier League isn't already using semi-automated?
I remember they put out a statement that they're choosing not to use semi-automated, even though the Champions League uses it, the World Cup uses it, and I think some of the other leagues use it as well. I don't know.
Baffling.
What else was there? There was, there was a challenge by Højlund, and I saw slow motion of it. He actually made contact, and he got a yellow card for it. He actually made contact with Nketiah's head, studs to the head. I
must have missed that one.
I saw someone actually clipped it, and you can see his foot when it makes contact. It actually swings back. Yeah. So it's it studs up like that, and it's and he got a yellow card for it. It's how was this not reviewed? So
come on, he's just an eager boy. Leave the boy alone.
No. Did I say Højlund? It was Lindelof, not Højlund.
Oh, okay, Lindelof. That's fine. You can send Lindelof off.
Yeah, that was given a yellow card, but when I saw a replay of it, that wasn't it was sort of semi slowed down. I was like, this could have been a red card. And then when I saw another replay of it on Twitter, and someone really slowed it down so you can actually see the foot movement, and I was like, this should have been a red. So there's that decision. The penalty decision, I reckon that's a penalty because when you're running, obviously your feet are coming back, and it's almost like I'd compare it to someone riding a bike and you kick their front tire and their front tire wobbles, and it's you're why are you kicking someone's front tire when they're going full speed? Obviously you're creating a chance that they're going to fall. So it's the same thing when you're running and your feet, like a naturally going back, like when you're taking the steps, and you're making contact with someone's back foot, you're obviously going to cause imbalance. So it's not about leaving your foot behind. It's like, well, what do you want? Does everyone need to change their running style then? So yes, I reckon that should have been a penalty. Maybe it errs on the softer side of penalties, but it still should have been a penalty because you're still making contact with a person when they're running full speed, and you're going to cause them to lose their balance. So I think that should have been a penalty. I think it should have stood. What else was there?
I think that's the main one.
I
But
think I think there was only those two. I think there might have been a third one, but I can't remember what.
who cares? We don't.
Yeah,
Arsenal love it.
yeah, exactly.
I think just quickly on that one, I don't think there was enough for a penalty, but once it was given, I don't think there was probably enough to overturn it. I think Gary Neville said that after the game as well, and I agree that especially after he said what we've seen so far this season, the bar to overturn, I instantly think of the Alexis McAllister one against Bournemouth, how that wasn't overturned there and then was baffling to me. So they clearly came in with a high bar and they changed it for that one. So after it was given, it probably should have stood. I get your point on that. Have an indecision on whether that is or not, because is it the attacking player's obligation to hurdle challenges, or should the defender just not be leaving their foot in the first place, even if there is no contact? I don't know. I just think we need to revise the whole penalty system, because penalties are 75% a goal, and sometimes you make fouls on the corner of the box and it leads to a 75% chance at a goal. It's just like, and it's a nothing foul as well. So, like, I get it, players should be more aware of that, but you shouldn't pay a punishment like that and change a whole game like that for such an innocuous foul. I think you should really have to earn penalties, and that's why I err on the side of that not being a penalty, not having enough.
I think
But
I didn't watch the Forest game. Was it Forest Man United last week? Someone mentioned that Rashford got a penalty for like it was almost it was really similar.
that was
really
actually similar. It was the challenge came in, it came across him, but it didn't really make contact. And then when Rashford was trying to run past the challenge, then his thigh kind of made contact with it. And I thought the same thing. I thought, you know what, maybe this shouldn't be given, but once it's given, it's there, and